first question many people ask as soon as they see the words Club Penguin and speedruns put together is, how do you even speedrun Club Penguin? Club Penguin is a massive multiplayer online game, or an MMO. There is no end goal to it, you simply play as you wish. However, inside it, there are mini-games, games within Club Penguin that are all completely different from each other. Most people still remember the more iconic mini-games, such as surfing around the mines on a cart, or making pizzas on a conveyor belt. These minigames each had unique mechanics and gameplay, and some even featured very concise end goals. Some minigames would show to be an interesting challenge and would awaken the interest of speedrunners. One of those minigames is Thin Ice. This puzzle game led many kids to be clueless on how to solve it. It also led speedrunners to challenge themselves. This game might look simple, but mastering it is a difficult task. This game requires the player to go through each level utilizing precise and non-stop movement for the duration of the run. Any tiny mistake, and the run is over. Speedrunners played this game for hours and improved to become the best they possibly could, and they battled for who can complete the game the fastest. 1 year ago, the runners did an incredible feat. They beat the game in the fastest possible time ever, achieving a time that can no longer be beaten by anyone. For this, they had to become perfect at the game's mechanics, grinding it for hours upon hours in a journey that took place over years. This is their history, and how they did it. Thin Ice was one of the first minigames in Club Penguin. It was a puzzle game that mimicked an arcade game. The gameplay of Thin Ice is simple. You control a black puffle that is on fire, and you walk over ice. As you walk, the ice turns into water, and you can no longer return. Melt all the ice around you, and you lose. Melt the wrong ice, and you won't be able to melt all of it. It featured a total of 19 levels, or mazes, and the goal was to complete each level by melting all possible ice, which is regarded as solving the level. Through its history, many gave their shot at solving the game, and a large number of guides reached the internet. However, as time passed, Club Penguin grew, and Thin Ice would be left in the background as new content would be released. Sadly, in February of 2017, Disney announced that Club Penguin would be shut down. This led the internet to shake. Many people started to pay respects and reminisce about this game that had been an important mark of their childhood. This is when the first Thin Ice speedrun appeared. A day after the shutdown announcement, Quo posted a video titled Thin Ice Speedrun World Record. This video claimed to complete it in a quick 36.02 seconds. So you might be asking yourself, what exactly is this run? As it was mentioned earlier, the goal of the game is to solve each level. However, the game does not stop you from ignoring this goal and going straight to the end. The game would not reward you from doing this. In fact, the protagonist of the game, the legendary Black Puffle, would give you a stare of anger and shame. This is precisely what Quobe did. They did an any percent speedrun. There is another catch. Quobe played on a non-member account, which meant they could only play up to level 10, as opposed to level 19. This explains why the run was so short. Its suggestive title must have drawn some attention, since this video gained a decent number of views, likely a result of everyone revisiting the game. It was nothing compared to the views banned percent speedruns would receive about 20 days later, but it still remains to this day as the most viewed Thin Ice speedrun. The run was not very serious. It looked very clear that the runner was simply playing the game as they went, and nothing more than just a tribute to the dying game, and there was no leaderboard at the time for Thin Ice anywhere, so this run just lived as a one-off on YouTube. There was one other runner who also did Thin Ice runs. Their name was Honey Arc, and they posted runs of the same style Quobe did, beating their times by a few seconds, achieving a time of 31.83 seconds on March 30th, 2017. These runs would then be forgotten, as on that same day, Club Penguin would be shut down forever. So you may be asking, did it end there? Well, of course not. If there is one thing that shutting the game down did, it was to bring attention to the game again. Now that the game was gone, people had to resort to some other way of playing the game. This is where private servers come in. As the name suggests, they were unofficial servers of Club Penguin. Explaining briefly, they use the same assets and files from the original game, except for the server emulator, which must be coded from scratch. These servers already existed before the game closed, but they often presented bizarre features you would not normally find on Club Penguin. As the game reached its end, mirror servers of Club Penguin started popping that tried to recreate the game. The server that got the most popularity with Club Penguin's closure was called Club Penguin Rewritten. This server gained a big boost in popularity immediately after the game's closure, gaining over 100,000 registered accounts in only a few days. Not just this, in the days preceding the shutdown, Club Penguin speedruns also got a big boost in popularity. The leaderboard on speedrun.com that featured only about 20 players would quickly rise to over 100 players. It was only a matter of time until people decided to continue the legacy left by the speedrunners of the original game. On the speedrun.com forums for Club Penguin, a thread was created titled "Club Penguin Rewritten Exists, Speedruns Are Not Dead Yet," which commented on the possibility of using the private server for doing runs. This thread contained a few people that would later become important, such as Random No and Fallhate, future moderators of the Club Penguin leaderboard, but also speedrun.com user named Bat, who suggested creating categories for Thin Ice, both any percent and a category for solving every level, which he called 100%. He submitted a game request to the website moderators for adding Club Penguin Rewritten, but it was denied under the reason that the series moderators had to decide to add it themselves. By doing this, he ended up becoming the first runner to complete a full game run of Thin Ice. Bat did a few runs, but none of these were recorded. However, in order to submit a game request to speedrun.com, he needed a video, and because of that, he ended up recording a run with a time of 1 minute and 42 seconds. This also revealed that his PB was a time of 1:31, as shown by his comparison. Now, membership was free, so anyone could play every level, which was very convenient for speedrunners, and since Club Penguin was gone, this would continue to be the pattern. As Bat's submission was rejected, the leaderboards would not be created, and the next runners would not be aware of this run's existence for a while. Later on that year, a few of the runners that were active on the original Club Penguin leaderboard came back to speedrun the game, this time using Club Penguin Rewritten. Their names were Lothyan, Goomba, the top two 500 coin runners, Random No, and Fallhate, who did PSA mission runs, the latter having previously held the record on it once in the past. Goomba and Lothyan both started doing 500 coin runs, while Fallhate and Random No wanted to create a new leaderboard to welcome Club Penguin Rewritten runs. They would set up a Discord server, and later the community would start to grow. With these new runners breaking records and playing the game again, the need for a leaderboard was becoming stronger. It was then that they contacted the series mod, who then created the Club Penguin Rewritten leaderboard. When the leaderboards were created, only mirror categories of the original leaderboard were created, for PSA missions and 500 coins. However, Fallhate, who had become a moderator, looked at the Club Penguin forums, and he saw that someone suggested adding arcade minigames as a category. After this, he started gathering input from the community about adding categories for these minigames. The community sampled through a few different possible minigames, including Thin Ice. Before any minigame categories were created, Enhar, a new runner at the time, was the first person to do minigame speedruns. He started off with Jetpack Adventure runs and later moved on to Thin Ice. Enhar's first Thin Ice speedruns were of the category All Solved Mazes, or for short, ASM. He grabbed some guides he found on the internet and started memorizing the solution to each level, and eventually started doing his first runs, initially getting a time of 10 minutes, which he would quickly bring down to a 7-minute 38-second time. And then, on the same day, he would stream Thin Ice for the first time. And by that, I mean stream a slide presentation. Here he would get an insane time of 5 minutes 13 seconds, a run so good that, actually that was just a split mistake, his actual time was a 6:45, his first run with footage. He would later post the 5:13 in the Discord jokingly and quickly point out that the time is not really possible. For these runs, sub 7 was the goal he had in mind, since he had seen a video guide on YouTube that was done in around 7 minutes and was motivated to beat it. Because of this, the 6:45 was technically his first world record. He also did an any percent run with a time of 2:12, which he did under the impression of being the first, not aware that Bat had already done runs of the same category. On the following day, Enhar uploaded his first any percent run with a time of 1:40. Now that there existed footage for both categories, Fallhate added them to the Club Penguin Rewritten leaderboards. Thus, the category that would later become the most popular on Club Penguin speedrunning was created. After this, Enhar kept running ASM. His 6:45 still had plenty of improvements to be done. One of the goals in mind was to get a no-level reset run, or in other words, solving every level first try. This actually proved to be very punishing, as messing up a level and having to reset was very easy. The way the game works is that when you mess up a level, you can no longer melt all the ice, and then you have to either die or click the reset button, which sets you back at the very beginning of the level. When playing the game quickly, messing it up becomes very easy, as all it takes is pressing a key for a bit longer or a bit shorter, and suddenly, the level is incompletable. Enhar had an idea of what the ideal run would be: simply don't stop moving at all. At the time, however, it did not feel within reach, as going that fast would be extremely risky and likely just result in failure and time loss. Later that night, after Enhar submitted his first runs, Fallhate also did a run of any percent. He got a time of 1:38, snatching the top spot on the leaderboard by 2 seconds, which at the time he also believed to be the world record. Enhar would respond later that same day with a time of 1:23.9, significantly lowering his any percent time, and while not aware of it, finally officially beating Bat's run. Having spent a considerable amount of time playing ASM had helped Enhar, as he ended up becoming familiar with each level's designs and paths. He imagined that as soon as someone memorized the paths well enough, it wouldn't be very hard to get a run that felt very good, but this run still featured few significant stutters. The next day, Enhar would attempt to improve his ASM time a little bit more with a time of 6:23. At the moment, his sum of best segments started to get close to sub 6, although he couldn't quite see himself getting it without playing a lot better. Well, he got better. 3 days later, he got the first sub 6 time, with a time of 5:46, and thus reaching his goal. He also beat his any percent time by a tiny amount and got a time of 1:23.3. After these runs, Enhar would take a small break, but later that month, he would stream Thin Ice once again.
So this is a speedrun live stream. The one I'm gonna do right now is Thin Ice.
He did a few attempts, and they weren't looking very good.
Oh no, I don't believe it. No. Okay, I messed up this.
But then, Enhar got this run. He got a time of 5:21, which was also his first deathless run, and only 3 seconds behind his sum of best segments. Needless to say, he felt it was very good for what he could do. However, he was not expecting to get it at all while streaming and talking with chat, and he soon realized one thing. He was now only 8 seconds away from the time that he had earlier posted to be impossible. Suddenly, this gave him the motivation to keep running the game. He wanted to prove himself wrong. This is when Enhar would be the first to discover the true face of Thin Ice. It had absolutely no mercy. Over the next few days, he would then stream for hours upon hours attempting to get a time below 5:13, failing run after run. No footage of the stream remains to this day, but if it existed, his runs would look something like this. ASM could get very difficult to go fast. The slightest mistake at any point was enough to end a run, and as he kept on failing, this would only make him angrier and angrier at the game. Not only that, Club Penguin Rewritten also featured lag issues, which would result in failed runs every now and again. He had been streaming for long amounts of hours, and this quickly became his biggest grind he had done since the minigame categories were created. Enhar felt like it wasn't progressing at all, and he kept on failing the same levels again and again, and it was starting to feel like an endless task. But then, this happened.
Let's do one more run, and if it's not a run, I'm gonna stop for a little bit again.
After hundreds of attempts, he finally beat his goal time, achieving a time of 5:06. This was it for Enhar. He had finally achieved his ultimate goal. This run was still improvable. He had a death on level 15, which lost him only about 3 seconds. His sum of best just barely reached 4 minutes, making sub 5 a possibility. The run also wasn't perfect, so it was clear that it could be improved, but being the only ASM runner, and after being subject to the grind, Enhar could not see himself having the motivation to go for sub 5 minutes. He would then abandon this category, but before abandoning the minigame, he made a comeback to any percent, bringing the time down by 2 seconds with a time of 1:21.3. It was only 2 seconds of improvement, but it no longer featured any visible stutter, and the speedrun was starting to look very optimized, just like Enhar had originally imagined it. Enhar had taken over Thin Ice, and not only that, in the month of January he had built a strong lead across all minigame categories, holding a variety of records. However, there was one person who would challenge him: Lotheon. Enhar and Lotheon had battled for the Jetpack Adventure record when the category was added, and after exchanging records, they eventually settled at a tie. Enhar had also beaten Lotheon's record on 500 coins with a new strat earlier in January, which Lotheon later beat back. Despite all this, the rivalry between these runners was just taking motion. On February the 12th, Lotheon would post his first run of Thin Ice with a time of 1:22. Even though it wasn't a record, it had beaten second place by a large margin, and it hinted at Lotheon possibly grinding for a new record soon. Before a lot could happen, an important event took place that slowed things down. Club Penguin Rewritten announced that they would shut down on March 4th. Suddenly, it looked as if the runners of the game would not be able to play anymore. As the runners and moderators discussed what would happen with the leaderboards, a new community member came and gave everyone a solution. A user that goes by the name of Stick developed an offline version of Club Penguin that allowed people to play on their own computer. This was nicknamed CPSC, which stands for Club Penguin Speedrunning Client. CPSC allowed players to play even after Club Penguin Rewritten's shutdown, and it shortly became the norm for speedruns once it featured improved load consistency, performance, and gave players the freedom to change files as they wanted. Enhar was the first runner to use it, and to attest to its quality for runs. It proved to be very handy, and even after Club Penguin Rewritten eventually returned, speedrunners kept using CPSC. However, it took a while for some runners to get into the rhythm of CPSC and to install it properly. The truth is, the installation of the client would often prove to be a difficult task, especially at the dawn of its invention, where not a lot of documentation or guides existed to help people install it. Eventually though, the other runners would get it working, including Lotheon. On April 8th, Lotheon improved his PB on Thin Ice to a solid 121.5, a run he thought to be perfect, and he had no idea how to improve it or if he would be able to beat Enhar. However, after further investigation, Lothjon found that his level 17 strat wasn't optimal, and that's why he was losing time. However, investigating even further, he found something unusual. He found that there existed two versions of level 17. Actually, it was already known by Enhar that after level 3, every level had two random variants that differed slightly. Enhar did not believe this influenced the speed in any percent, but Lotheon found that one of the variants of level 17 was shorter, which made it faster to go through than the other one. Enhar's run had the faster variant, while Lotheon's had the slower one. While this finding was being discussed, Lotheon posted this enigmatic message. A few hours later, he would then post this. For the first time since the leaderboards were created, Enhar was challenged, and by Lotheon, his greatest rival at the time. The run was not weak either. Despite still having bad RNG in level 17, he would be able to pull better execution and beat the record with a time of 121.2, snatching the lead by just a few frames. Despite that, on the same day, Enhar would answer back with a time of 120.9, beating Lothjon's run only a couple of hours after it was done. This exchange of records was so fast that Lothjon only got to hold the top spot on speedrun.com for a few minutes. This time, Enhar once again got a good level 17. At this point, it was hard to see where the time was being lost, if any was being lost at all. Unless anything crazy was found, it did not look like Thin Ice would be improved by a lot more. Here, Lotheon predicted that the best possible time would be something around a 120.82, which he found by removing the time loss on level 17 from his personal best. Following these runs, a problem that had emerged was that retiming runs was starting to become annoying. As a consequence of this, and after the continued interest from the community, about 2 months later on May 25th, Stick released an auto-splitter for CPSC, supporting a few minigames such as Jetpack Adventure and Thin Ice. If you don't know, an auto-splitter is, in short, a program that automatically handles your timer. With this, the runners hoped that they would be able to run with more accurate times. On May 28th, Enhar started testing the auto-splitter for Thin Ice. However, as Enhar kept playing with the auto-splitter, it started giving weird results. With just a few runs, Enhar's sum of best segments for each level was starting to get really low, going as low as 120.4, a total half a second faster than its actual personal best. Did that mean that the category could be pushed by that much? Well, not really. Unfortunately, the auto-splitter wasn't exactly perfect. It did work, but it wasn't accurate to the frame, Every time it split, the program read file outputs, so sometimes it would lag and be a few frames off. This would not be a problem for most speedruns, but for Thin Ice, the accumulated inaccuracy would add up to be quite significant. On that stream, Enhar would later get this: a time of 120.84 according to the autosplitter. However, it was later retimed to a 0.8 due to the autosplitter splitting slightly late. A few days later, another runner that would be important showed up. His name was Goomba. He was already known for exchanging records with Lotheon in 500 coins, and had been around for quite a long time. On May 31st, he posted a time of 120.9, beating Lotheon's time and claiming second place. In trying to understand just how the game worked, Goomba brought the possibility of level transitions lagging and resulting in lost time. Since the runs looked the same in execution, it would explain why Enhar's run was faster than his old personal best, or Goomba's run. This idea was shortly backed up by Lothjon, however, Enhar did not feel confident about it. On the next day, not falling behind Goomba, Lotheon posted a time of 120.9 himself. Thin Ice was looking interesting. We had 3 top runners right next to each other, and their sum of best suggested that they could go much lower, making the runners believe that maybe a lot of room for optimization was left. It was also discovered that another level had RNG. On level 8, sometimes you would lose about a tile from getting the worst pattern, which started being significant as runs got to this level of optimization. On that same day, Lotheon posted another personal best, with a time of 120.86 as displayed by the autosplitter. After seeing Enhar's run, he was confused as to why he submitted a different time than what the autosplitter showed. Then, Lotheon just decided to retime Enhar's run altogether, and he found very incoherent results from the recording of Enhar's run. Enhar was streaming to Twitch and the video had lost quality, and so the frames at the beginning of the run looked very weird. The runners weren't able to come with a feasible conclusion since dropped frames and the lost quality kept on giving ambiguous results. After some more discussion, Enhar and Lotheon eventually came to agree that Lotheon's personal best was actually tied to the frame with Enhar's, and both sat at a time of 120.82 at the top. The runners still weren't sure about the weird footage, but they were confident that they could keep on breaking the records, so they kept going. On July 3rd, a new top runner entered the game, Andrew, who got a time of 120.85, and a day after, Goomba replied with a time of 120.82. After Goomba's run was submitted, the runs were all retimed to 120.833, so that the times accurately matched the number of frames in the video. We now had 4 top-level runners right next to each other, featuring a 3-way tie at first place, and the runners were looking forward to bringing the record down. But despite their optimism, they were not able to push it any further. And, as each new run would bring more discussions about retiming, the runners would only come back once the following big thing showed up. It was the in-game timer. Around December of that year, Stick developed the first version of the in-game timer for Thin Ice. In-game timers are common features in games, and even a few Club Penguin minigames had it, such as Puffle Launch, which is in fact created by the same developer of Thin Ice, Aaron Hibbard, also known as Hibby Games. A modded in-game timer for Thin Ice was being considered to aid the runners. Enhar was not able to play at the time, and Lotheon was the only one to test it. The first version was a little buggy, giving a time of 137 to a run that felt 120 worthy. This first version was quickly fixed, and in the next version, Lotheon posted a run with a time of 120.767. However, this was not quite yet a record, since this new version of the in-game timer showed another mistake. It started the time at -0033 instead of 0, so Lothjon's run was a frame faster than what it should be. So you may be asking, wouldn't that give it a time of 120.8, still faster than the record? Well, yes, but because players were skeptical of the in-game timer being accurate, and since Lotheon was the only one getting to test it, it would be put aside and this run was never submitted nor properly discussed. On April 11th of the next year, 2019, the discussion was brought up again when Andrew had noticed that some weird lag might have caused him to lose the record on his run. A discussion came about the rules, and quickly, the runners decided to bring back the in-game timer and officially allow it for runs. With this, and using the new in-game timer mod, Lothjon finally posts a run at the time with a time of 120.8, officially breaking the record tie. Well, not really. The run was submitted to speedrun.com for a short period of time, however, Enhar noticed that there was another problem with the in-game timer. It was still in fact finishing a frame earlier under the regular rules, and Lothjon's record would still be a .833. This proved to happen on all runs Lotheon recorded, so the in-game time experienced one final correction, and Lotheon's .8 was removed from the leaderboards. After this fix, the in-game timer proved to be extremely reliable, and all the runners could finally run thin ice free of the worries of having to retime runs. There was just one problem. The only way to play with an in-game timer was to download CPSC, which some runners had a lot of trouble with at the time, including Andrew, who couldn't get it to work on his computer. If CPSC was required to be able to submit runs, it would be a lot less accessible to run thin ice. But then, Stick presented the final solution. The holy grail of thin ice speedrunning, the standalone version of Thin Ice, which included the in-game timer. With this, you could download the game in a matter of seconds, open it, and play a perfectly functional game of Thin Ice. Just like that, Thin Ice became the most accessible minigame on speedrunning this game. Finally free of any trouble, the runners were finally ready to face their greatest challenge: break the .833 barrier. However, it suddenly clicked to them. After Lotheon getting 6 .833s, Andrew tying the record with a .833 on April 14th, and Pasark, another runner, tying the record on April 15th, the runners quickly realized that they had hit the limit of Thin Ice. There was simply no improving past this. Any percent was solved. The hard proof of this fact came only a year later when Pasark did a tool-assisted speedrun of Thin Ice, which uses tools to simulate perfect gameplay, and showed that the best possible time was indeed 120.833. Lotheon was spared from eating a shoe, and the runners finally settled down on any percent speedruns. So, that was the end of Thin Ice speedruns. Or was it? Are we not forgetting anything? Well, yes, we're forgetting about all solved mazes. This category was forgotten by the runners as their focus was put on the Any Percent category. Any Percent ended up becoming the most popular in the leaderboards, and a number of people reached top-level times. But during this, no one had given a good try at ASM. ASM was much harder to start running in contrast to Any Percent, and that difficulty was a big barrier to get other runners to play it. Lotheon did give it a shot, but he had no goals of getting a time as optimized as Enhar's, and he only got a decent time so that he could become the Penguin Points champion, something which we'll not be discussing in this video. However, this was about to change. Someone was about to start running this category, and they would challenge Enhar's record that had stood well for over a year. On April 13th of 2019, while players were discussing the rules for the in-game timer, Andrew, who had been a little frustrated by the Any Percent runs, decided to try out ASM. He quickly turned it away, as he said that just the first few levels made him very mad. He made a few joke remarks about not wanting to run it ever, as it would inevitably lead him to losing his mind over it. However, after the events that went down, Andrew had tied the Any Percent record, and having no more Thin Ice to play, he would start running ASM. He uploaded his progress as he kept learning each maze, and later, on that same day, started doing runs. Andrew based most of his levels on Enhar's run. When solving levels on Thin Ice, some mazes can have multiple ways of being solved. Enhar's methods of solving the levels had been a reference for the next runners, including Andrew. However, he did do a few changes to them. These changes did not affect the speed of completion, but some ways of solving levels might have been harder for a few runners, and thus led to less consistent results. Andrew's lines had a few minor differences, and even though nothing was too different yet, he would slowly start changing some of his routes to quite a significant extent. After he started doing runs, he quickly started to improve. In the next day, he would get a time of 6:02, achieving second place and beating Lotheon's run. However, this run brought some controversy. It was never submitted to the leaderboards because Andrew was running on a modified version of the standalone client, which allowed for level resets with a hotkey. In order to reset a level normally, you need to either die, which has an animation, or click the reset button. But Andrew's Thin Ice had been modified so that he could immediately restart the level with a hotkey. This change was thoroughly denied by the moderators, but some runners questioned whether or not it was a significant change to render the run illegal. Andrew kept using it on runs, so none of his times were verified. However, Andrew's goal was to get a deathless run, so once that happened, he would not need to worry about the invalid hotkey. He kept running the game. Just on April 21st, he had started posting some of his failed attempts, on which some had the potential to beat the record. He was doing a lot of runs and his improvement was looking promising. It quickly became obvious that he would make the push for the world record. On the 3rd of May, he finally achieved a deathless run, which meant his run did not use the invalid hotkey and it could be submitted to the leaderboards. This run also turned out to be a record by a few seconds. He got a time of 5:00.27, breaking Enhar's lead that had remained intact for over a year. But unfortunately, we no longer have footage of this run. But Andrew didn't stop there. Being only mere frames away from sub 5, he kept pushing it. Andrew kept practicing each level, trying to become perfect at them. It was still very hard to pull it all off in one run, but Andrew could now solve most of the levels with any percent levels of perfection on ASM. Andrew's experience with any percent helped him better understand how the game inputs worked and how to implement it to result in more consistent solutions. For example, Andrew discovered that you could auto-solve level 7 by just holding all 4 arrow keys. The idea of playing perfectly just like on any percent had been in the back of the runners' minds for ages, but being able to actually perform it had always been a big challenge. Andrew was the one who started to change that. Finally, 5 days later, he got the first ever sub 5, a time of 4:58.2, giving conclusion to this goal that had been on hold for well over a year. But Andrew still did not stop there. 2 months later, Andrew was back at it.
Just go fast? Okay, I'll go fast. I'll go as fast as I can. I'm not gonna slow down in the whole run.
And on this run, Andrew would manage to get this.
I did it. 440. 447. Nice.
4:47.2. At this point, Andrew had saved almost 20 seconds over Enhar's records, which was considered untouchable for the longest time. There was no doubt on how much he had optimized Thin Ice, but he still wasn't done. He had one goal. He wanted to get one single smooth run with no big stops, a run that felt like the any percent runs. For this, he made a spliced run, a run consistent of segments played at different times, which he would use as a reference. This segmented run had a total time of 4:41.367, and this is what he considered as the perfect ASM run. He had faith that no one would be able to beat it, but he wanted to give his try at pushing ASM as far as he could, and he was not too far, being only 6 seconds away from it. Then, Andrew returned to the grind. He first pushed the time down to a 4:43.
Holy shit, it's a 443. Oh my fucking god, I'm a fucking legend.
However, this run wasn't valid for the leaderboards, because he once again used the hotkey which was not allowed in runs, so it was not an official record. But this was it. A 4:43 with a reset meant that the end was getting close. And then, this happened.
441. Fucking yes. I can barely feel my legs. Yes.
ASM was gone. After thousands of attempts and playing the game off for months, Andrew had achieved what was considered as one of the hardest runs to beat in all of the Club Penguin leaderboards, bringing ASM to a level of optimization compared to any percent, with him almost not stopping at it throughout the entire run. Andrew beat this run by a tiny amount 10 days later, with a time of 4:41.8, saving 4 frames. With this run, Andrew would then retire the category as he had reached his biggest goal. A few months went by and Andrew's run remained untouched. Seemingly, none of the other runners were improving on Thin Ice, and it looked as if Thin Ice's record would stay with Andrew for a long amount of time. But then, in November that year, this happened.
Guys.
Yeah, but you have to be Cloud to be like.
Guys, new all-solved mazes world record.
Wait, what?
Out of nowhere, Enhar comes back to the category and submits a run straight to the world record, beating Andrew's run with a time of 4:41.567. Enhar's run had quite a few differences from what he did over a year ago. He adapted some of Andrew's new solutions, but introduced a few levels that were very different from Andrew. In particular, level 10 was being solved from the left, as opposed to as from the right, like Andrew was doing. ASM records were now being exchanged by frames, just like any percent in its final days. But despite both runners now being very close to Andrew's human limit, it still felt like there was a big road ahead. It was nearly impossible to know where runners were losing time, and they had no idea just how fast they could go. It also wasn't easy to get a run like this, as it took them hundreds of attempts and wasted runs to be able to get this far, and grinding for more runs like these without even knowing what a good time is did not feel like a particularly good task. So another important event took place. In the next year, Passark was able to make a TAS, a tool-assisted speedrun of Thin Ice. We mentioned this earlier, but this is when it happened in the chronology. Passark did a TAS for each category, first for any percent, which proved that the runners had the perfect time, and one for ASM. This gave the players the time of 4:41.3. This was slightly faster than Andrew's spliced run, but this was it. If the players were to ever solve Thin Ice ASM, this would be the time that they would get. In June of 2020, after grinding for a while, Andrew came back and beat Enhar's run by a frame with a 4:41.533, finally reclaiming the record.
Oh shit, world record. Yes, world record. Holy shit, I got it. Holy shit. Just in time to get to my swim class.
This run had one major difference, level 15. This level was considered to be the hardest level to be played perfectly, as it is a long level with a very eccentric route. They had used the route that Enhar had introduced, but Andrew tried to look for a solution for this level that wouldn't be as inconsistent. So he came up with a completely new route, which he considered to be much better, and it took part of this new record. This record stood for a bit over a week, but then, on June the 12th, Enhar uploaded this speedrun of ASM, a 4:41.433. Upon the upload of this video, the speedrun community was taken aback. The record was only 4 frames away from perfection. It was clear. The race for who would be the first person to get the perfect time was on. After this run, Andrew quickly came back and did a run after not running for a week. He was able to pull back a 4:41.567 during practice, showing that he was still in the game, and then Enhar sent this screenshot. Another frame improved with a time of 4:41.4. This is when things got urgent. These runners were both very close to becoming perfect, and now is when they would officially start the grind. People were no longer asking if they would ever see a perfect ASM run, they were asking when. After the .4 was posted, Andrew suggested to Enhar to do a race stream, where they both stream their attempts as they try to get the perfect run. Enhar accepted the idea, and a few hours later, this is when it would all begin. They agreed to both stream their games to Discord, and then Passark would get to restream the race to Twitch, with both runners shown side to side. When they got in, Enhar started streaming, and he started with a few runs. Before the race had even started, Enhar got this time, a time of 4:41.367. The expectations for this race were big. Enhar, who had improved by frames in the span of a day, was only 2 frames away from the end, and Andrew was yet to catch up to him. The race started with a no reset run. Well, actually, that was a terrible start for both runners, as they both died a few times and ended up getting times over 6 minutes. But they kept going. They started together again, but no longer in a direct race, resetting whenever they felt like it. The start of the race was a great way to showcase both runners' skills. They both proceeded to solve the first levels perfectly, showcasing their different playstyles. Enhar would be the first to hold the lead in the race, as Andrew would reset on level 11. That run was looking promising, but then he messed it up on level 14. Andrew was on the world record run.
This is the world record run right here, by the way.
Look, this one's gonna be world record.
But then he reset the run on level 10. Enhar kept the lead for a few runs as Andrew reset on level 11, which was followed by this terribly malicious threat from Andrew towards Enhar,
I'm going to kill Enhar.
and he reset on level 10. Enhar was on another run that looked pretty good. He was the first to get a run going to level 15. Passark commented on the matter as he proclaimed that the run would be the world record.
This run by Enhar is gonna be the world record.
As soon as he said it,
He's on WRPs. Right now,
Andrew had the lead once again, and he got up to level 12 when Enhar had lost a run on level 10. However, immediately after that, Andrew lost that run, giving Enhar the lead again, and suddenly Enhar surprisingly lost a run on level 1, the easiest level, giving Andrew the lead back. After a few runs, Andrew was the first to get a run into level 16, but then he lost it.
Fuck.
Enhar was seen on level 20.
he's on level 20.
Well, he was on a good run on level 15, which he ended up losing. On that stream, Enhar was struggling a bit with level 15 as he was still getting used to Andrew's new route. This was made clear by him practicing level 15 in the middle of the race. Later, Andrew, who was in a perfect pace run, claimed he would get the world record.
Look, this run in blue right now is gonna be the world record.
Well, he was still at the beginning.
What level are you at?
Level 4.
And he would later lose the run on level 15. After this, Enhar would struggle to get past level 10 for a few attempts, while Andrew would lose 2 runs to level 15. Finally, Andrew was on this promising run.
Okay. I think that's 80.
Ooh,
Yep, I
nice.
think that's 80. 366, I tied you.
Whoa.
Yo, let's go.
With the first completed run of the race, Andrew got a time of 4:41.367, tying the record for the first time in ASM history and putting the race on equal ground. This was it. Both runners were within 2 frames from the limit. It was only a matter of time before one of them got the good run. They kept racing, but no more runs were completed. It was starting to get late, and Passar called the stream off. Enhar and Andrew stayed on the voice chat for a while as they continued to grinding, in a final attempt to get the perfect run. Things weren't looking good anymore. The players seemed to have gotten tired from doing runs, and all their attempts were dying. Sometime after the stream had ended, Andrew announced his last run on the voice call.
Yeah, I'm gonna do one more run past level 15.
It seemed like the end. It seemed as if ASM would see the light of day once again. But then, this happened.
Are there any RNG minutes? Or?
Hold up. Point 3! Point 3! Did it! I did it! Then Ice is dead. I got point 3.
Congrats, dude.
I'm gonna put camera on and I'm gonna do the funny. I'll be right back.
I can't believe this.
Then Ice is dead.
And Harry, you need to make the Brazil comeback.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it.
I tied the task.
So, what's it like being a human task, Andrew?
Feels pretty good.
Just like that, Andrew would set the end of Thin Ice speedruns on June 12th of 2020 with a time of 4:41.3, tying the task and reaching perfection.
I'll pick this up and check this out.
At this moment this video is being published, it has been a whole year since Thin Ice reached its final limit. 2 months after Andrew's run, Enhar posted a run tying the perfect time, finally setting an end to his 2-year career that had started at the dawn of ASM speedrunning. Quobe, the original Thin Ice speedrunner, who had not been seen playing the game again ever since, commented on the video of Andrew's 4:41.3, congratulating him for his incredible deed. So far, many other runners managed to tie the 80% record, with currently 10 players sitting in first place, but no one else has dared to go for the perfect ASM run besides Andrew and Enhar. Will anything on Thin Ice ever be discovered that will break the record, or is the journey officially over forever? Thanks for watching.
Sorry about that, bro.